Hello everybody, I'm just here on the beach as part of my daily exercise, and I thought I'd come and give you guys a little virtual field trip because quite frankly the weather is awful. It's really cold, and I know a lot of you are not really able to get out as much as you might have done when we were locked down in the summertime. So I just thought I'd come down and do a quick video to show you how to use a quadrat on the beach. So I hope you enjoy, and here we go, let's start. Hello everybody, this is Miss Foreshore, and I'm just recording a little video to show you how you can make your own quadrat using some paper straws and some string and some sellotape. So you don't need a lot of equipment for this. So to make a quadrat, you're going to need a few paper straws. So the reason we're using paper straws is because they're actually very strong considering what they are. You could use anything else that you might have at home that will give you a similar suitable effect. Now if you pinch the end of the straws a bit like this so it folds over, then you should be able to slot one straw into another, which is why we're using these. And then you can, if you feel like that's not secure enough, pop a bit of sellotape around the joints, and that'll give you a much stronger structure. So we're going to put together 4 of these. So we've got the 4 sides of our quadrat, so we're just going to bend the end of one of the straws, slot it into the other one, and secure with a bit of extra tape just for extra structural stability. And again, if you just pinch the end, slot it in, and then tighten that up. Now we can do the same thing to make the corners as well. So you can actually pinch and slot in the corners and then bend it so that you have a right angle. So we're going to make a square because a quadrat should be a square. Now most quadrats are about 1/2 metre by 1/2 metre, but of course ours is going to be whatever size you can manage. If I just grab my ruler here, let's see how long this actually is. That's 30 centimetres. About 37 centimetres squared. So decent size. Should be big enough for what we need to do. So I'm just going to fold this up again, slot it in, bend, and secure with a bit of tape. And then we should have, I mean, you can hopefully you can kind of see that it's not all going to fit in where I've got my camera angle, but we'll do our best. I've got nowhere else to put the camera. And then last corner. So I'm just going to put a bit of sellotape on all the corners to make sure they are nice and tight, and that this isn't going to fall apart when I actually take it outside to use it. Okay, so it's not a 100% perfect square, but it is the closest I can make with what I've got at home. And if, of course, you happen to have something similar, you can try making your own. And then we're going to sort of put some string across to make the squares inside the quadrat. So I move that further back. So I've got some long pieces of string here, and just the absolute quickest way to do this is to just tie them on. So you just take a piece of string that's about the same size as your quadrat and just tie it on. And you're going to need to do this with several pieces of string to make a sensible number of squares. So I'm going to try and put 5 in each direction. So I'm going to put 5 across and 5 going down. And if you just tie them on like I'm doing at the moment, they're actually quite loose, so you can slide them up and down so you can get them in exactly the right place, and then you can always tighten them up later. So I can move these up and down so they're in whatever position I want them, and then I can just tighten it up to make them a bit more secure. So I'm going to do 5 down and 5 across. So I'll just start doing the ones across as well, so you can see what that will look like. And this will give us the squares that we need for our quadrat. So hopefully we can see that I'm starting to get, I move them so that they are in a more sensible position. It's hard with this camera angle, there we go, that's better. You can see that I'm starting to get those squares that I will need when I'm outside doing my sampling. So if you do 5 down and 5 across, then you should have a full size, ready to use quadrat. So good luck everybody, I hope you managed to give this a try, and I'm going to record a separate video of me out using my homemade quadrat later on. Thank you! Hi everyone, so this is my quadrat and I've popped it down on a bit of rock here, and I've come to this particular beach not just because it's my local one and I don't want to travel very far during lockdown, but also because I know there are plenty of different types of seaweed, and we've got limpets here, and we also have sea snails, which are quite easy to spot and good for sampling. So I've just popped my quadrat down in a random spot to see what I can see in my quadrat. And now I've got 25 squares in my quadrat, and I can see here that I've got one here with a limpet in it. So when I am writing down my results, I can record that I have 1 limpet. But if I look at the different types of seaweed here, this brownish seaweed here is called bladderwrack, and we also have this green seaweed, which is a lovely feathery type of seaweed. You can see that this is actually covering quite a number of squares, the green one. So I can say that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8, 9 squares there. There are of course going to be squares where it's a bit sort of 50-50, and it's going to be up to you to decide whether you think that that one needs to be counted as a square, or whether you think that that one needs to be counted as, maybe you can put 2 half squares together to make a whole square. So when you're doing this kind of sampling, it's giving you a rough idea of what kind of species you have present and roughly how many are there, but it's not an exactly perfect science because it's open to a little bit of interpretation. I clearly only have 1 limpet, but I do have a variation in the number of squares that have this bladderwrack as well. I mean, should we say that's a whole square's worth of bladderwrack when this one here is clearly a full square? We've got 2 half squares here. Should I add those 2 together and make them into a whole? So that's how we use our quadrat. We count basically what we can see in the different squares of our quadrat. So when we are recording our quadrats and deciding where to put them, we need to place them randomly. Now of course randomly doesn't mean just chucking it and hoping for the best. So the best thing to do to make it random is to use a random number generator. And an easy way to do this is actually to, if you use a random number generator, it'll give you a certain number of numbers. You can then say, I'm going to take 3 steps to the left if it's chosen 3 as your random number, or you could say I'm going to take 2 steps backwards, and that's going to give you a random place to put your quadrat without you using your own bias, because you might be looking at a bit of this beach and going, oh look, there's loads of seaweed there, so I'll put it there. you need to actually do it as randomly as possible. So using a random number generator to do that is the best way. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start taking a time lapse of me popping my quadrat down in various different locations based on a random number generator. So I mentioned in one of my earlier clips that I know this beach is really good, not just for limpets, but which are these? There's a lovely limpet, and of course barnacles, which are basically like a really small version of a limpet, which look like this. But it's also quite a good beach for sea snails, which are sometimes known as dog whelks. And I didn't actually get any in the random places that my quadrats ended up, but I thought I'd just come down a little bit further and show you some little snails. So here you go. If it's a slightly less rough day, we sometimes get little fish in the rock pools as well, but I haven't managed to spot any today, but that might just be because it's really stormy and it's absolutely freezing. So hopefully you've enjoyed your little field trip with me today on the beach, and hopefully I'll be seeing you all soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye. So another way to use your quadrats, instead of just placing them randomly using a random number generator, is to lay out something called a transect. And transects are basically a straight line made with a tape measure, and then you pop your quadrat down every 2 meters or every 5 meters depending on how long your transect is. Now I haven't actually got a tape measure with me today, unfortunately, because my tape measure is only 2 meters long, which isn't long enough for us to do this. But that's another way you can do it, and it's really good to sample along something like a shoreline where we have a change in the sort of conditions, because up here where I am at the top, where it's sandy and stony, the tide only covers this part for a few hours a day, whereas further down there we have the rocks that are underwater for most of the day. So we'll find different species living in these different areas. You can see here that the seaweed at the top where I am now is mostly a green seaweed, and that's because it gets more light. It's able to photosynthesize for most of the day because it's not covered up by the water, whereas the seaweed down the bottom there, the bladderwrack seaweed, is brown seaweed, and that is the part of the rocks here that's mostly covered up during the day by the tide, so it doesn't get the opportunity to photosynthesize as much. And hopefully you can hear me over the wind, apologies. So doing a transect is another way to lay out your quadrats, and then you would pop your quadrat down and then you move it to say 2 meters in a straight line and sample again in a 2 meter spot a bit further over. So bear with me, it's quite hard to climb over these rocks, but maybe we'll pop it down somewhere else 2 meters along, and then we'll move it 2 meters that way and then 2 meters that way, and so on until we get to the end of our transect. So that's just another technique. I'm sorry I don't have a giant tape measure to lay out a transect for you. We'll have to use your imagination. Hi, so I'm back now from my little beach field trip, and I just wanted to show you my results. So for each of those quadrats, I know I time-lapsed them because it was going to take forever to stand there and video me counting all the different bits in them. So I did 5 quadrats. So I've got my quadrat numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here I've got the species that I found there. So this is the amount of bladderwrack that was there. So there were 2 squares in my first quadrat. There were 2 squares of bladderwrack. Gutweed, that was that little green feathery looking seaweed. I didn't have any of that in my first one, and I didn't have any limpets. But in my second quadrat, I had 3 squares of bladderwrack. I had a bit of the gutweed, 2 squares worth, and I also had some limpets in there as well. So this is basically my results table, and I just thought I would show you so that when you come to do quadrats of your own, you'll know what you're looking for and how to record your results. And hopefully you'll get the chance to do way more than 5 quadrats. But hopefully it will also be an awful lot warmer when you get round to doing this yourselves as well. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day, everyone. Bye!